I'm Frank Vaughn. It's June 4th, 2025, and I've noticed a curious theme. Whenever I talk about the Russo-UKR war, viewership falls off, and I can't figure out if it's algorithmic suppression or if people just tune out because of the enormity of it. It's just too big. I was talking to a friend last night, and he actually indicated as well that when I talk about it, he kind of tunes it out. He still watches, he puts it on in the background, but he kind of tunes it out. It's one of the, if not the most important thing going on in the world right now, but maybe it's just too much for people to grasp. But anyway, I think I've talked about it enough. We're going to talk about some other interesting things that are going on today. For those of you who don't know, this is Asmongold. He got his start streaming games, but I think now he just reacts to news events. I don't actually know. I watch his clips sometimes. I don't know if he even plays video games anymore.
Here we go.
It was a bit of a range of emotions this morning coming here and getting dressed for this flight. We are doing the first ever, now let me get that one straight because a few letters have been added to this one, 2S LGBTQIA plus flight ever in Canada. I do identify with the progress flag. There's something in...
Does this mean that, like, the plane doesn't fly straight or something like that? Or what's the difference between this and a straight flight? Like, this doesn't even make any sense.
So it was a bit of joy having the opportunity to do this flight today.
Features our very first all 2S LGBTQIA plus crew.
The safety and the well-being of all the passengers on board rests in our hands. So it doesn't matter who they are, what they represent. I'm equally responsible.
Sure does. Sure seems like it does.
Yeah, it's so funny that they're not even self-aware enough to understand as they speak the words that it doesn't matter what we are, the safety of the plane and the safety of the passengers is paramount. They're virtue signaling about the fact that the plane is either just full of gay people or trans people, but also mentally ill people.
For all of them.
2S stands for two-spirited. You used to call this multiple personality disorder. Okay, people aren't going to believe this. 2S, a term used by some indigenous peoples of North America to describe a person who embodies both masculine and feminine spirits or genders. The woman who came up with 2S admitted that she had it from a dream that she had.
The grandfathers came in a dream, the gift and the greatness of two spirit. 7 orbs of light. They came, one after the other, 7 of them.
The rebranding of mental illness as normal human behavior, and then taking those mentally ill people and giving them the responsibility for a great big sardine can flying through the sky and celebrating it. That's not to say everybody on the plane has a mental illness problem. But we're now saying as a society, and this is the point I'm trying to make, that if you have multiple personality disorders, that you can't even successfully identify with the biological reality of your body, that you believe, not in God, not in faith, not in religion, that you believe you were born in the wrong body. I always wonder, how can a person be born in the wrong body absent some kind of creative force that made the mistake? It's like replacing God with this other notion that biology got it wrong, that the unfolding of your genetic code that makes you what you are is somehow mistaken, that you, your soul, your spirit, your two spirits, are somehow more powerful than your unfolding biology, absent some kind of faith in a higher order or a greater power. It doesn't make any sense. But we're now saying that if somebody has these different disorders, it's not a reason to exclude them from the highest responsibilities in the land, including flying planes, or, for instance, doing air traffic control work, as has been happening in the United States with helicopters crashing into planes and planes crashing and all kinds of near misses and near disasters. And we're not supposed to criticize it anymore. We're supposed to believe that a purple-haired, mentally ill person wandering down the road on drugs is a sign of progress, that they are not to be stigmatized as drug addicts with mental illness, that they are not to be institutionalized or helped in some way to become more normalized, but that we're supposed to celebrate it. We're supposed to embrace their mental illness. We're supposed to give them hard drugs so that they can do them. We're supposed to give them a safe place to do it. And hell, let's just decriminalize it altogether. And when they commit violence against the public that's just trying to go about their business and be good little tax slaves, we say it's society's problem because we weren't understanding enough. Look at what happened with that Pickering stabbing. The mayor comes out and expresses sympathy and expresses fake empathy with the killer. That the stigma of having stabbed someone to death is going to haunt him for the rest of his life. This is Canada, and more importantly, this is Canada in the eyes of the world. Asmongold is an American.
One straight because a few letters have been added to this one. 2S LGBTQIA plus flight ever in Canada.
This needs to stop. You need to stop adding letters. This is sounding like a router password.
And that's the zinger, sounding like a router password. It's ridiculous. And since we're here talking about Asmongold and World of Warcraft has been mentioned, let's just talk about World of Warcraft. And more importantly, the company behind World of Warcraft, Blizzard. It's Pride Month, and so, of course, they've released their Pride merch. Do you notice anything missing? The one that I find really absurd is a Diablo t-shirt in the trans colors. Do you notice anything missing? How about the rainbow? Some people are out there, and I just want to reiterate this point. Some people out there are just gay. That's it. Perfectly stable, out there working, doing their thing. They're just gay. They have been eliminated not just by Blizzard, but by many companies, by the T in LGBT. And if you go out there and you talk to gay people, I have numerous gay people who follow my account, people I know, they really object to that T being universally included in the acronym. And that's, you see, as you go further and further and deeper into the acronym, things get gradually more unhinged. Two spirits, kind of just the beginning. There are advocates out there. There's a thing called NAMBLA. I'm not going to, well, it's man-boy love. You can understand what that means. There are open advocates trying to slap a P in there because love is love, right? This is the kind of stuff that's going on. This is the kind of progress. At the same time, we talked about Elizabeth May backing a petition talking about a gayicide here in Canada. And I know she didn't call it a gayicide. She called it the petition calls it a gay genocide that's ongoing, and I'm just combining the words to make life simpler. Nothing could be further from the truth except for the fact that Canada has an openly tolerant policy towards cultures and belief systems that would eliminate not just the two S's and the T's, but all the gay people too. We have an open door. We import thousands of them every single year, and we give them big fat checks subsidized by the taxpayer. So the gayicide is actually being supported by Elizabeth May and politicians like her because they're allowing it to foster here. Those private religious schools that preach that philosophy do not teach the gender unicorn, do not teach about Pride Month. They are exempt from the curriculum that's being spoon-fed to those of you who have children and sending them to public school. There's a certain agenda, there's a certain ideology that's being forced down their throats and being forced down your throat, often without your knowledge, and if you dare speak up about it, you can run into some serious difficulties in your life. You got to be shrewd. You got to be very strategic nowadays. Just to be able to raise your children to be normal, functional human beings. But anyway, back to the point. These are the trans colors. There's no rainbows anymore during Pride Month over at Blizzard. Moving on to another subject in the ongoing clown show that is this nation, this post-national state, somehow a post-national state that we're not allowed to talk about leaving here in the West. We're not supposed to talk about it. We're unified. We're Canada. We're strong and we're proud, but we're also post-national. We're also diverse. The country doesn't have a core cultural feature, yet we're strong and united around what? The idea that we're not American. Carney calls U.S. 50% steel and aluminum tariffs illegal. Just because Carney says a thing doesn't make the thing real. We should know that by now, considering how often this man contradicts himself without even a moment's reflection, and on the part of journalists, no questions whatsoever, just repetition, which is what this article is. Prime Minister Mark Carney called U.S. President Donald Trump's doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum imports illegal and said the federal government would take some time to consider its next steps. Carney made the comments Wednesday, hours after Trump's executive order went into effect for numerous countries, including Canada. I want to remind you, Canada charges some of the most punitive tariffs against not just the Americans, but the world who want to sell in our market. We love tariffs as long as we're charging them to other nations. We only hate tariffs. Actually, we don't mind tariffs when they're charged by Europeans. We don't mind tariffs when they're charged by China. We only mind tariffs that are charged by Trump. Why? Because Canadians have been hypnotized, because Canadians have been propagandized to believe the orange man is the greatest demon facing the earth. In ignorance of all the facts that we've highlighted on this channel, Donald Trump is responsible for all the ills that have plagued the world since long before he even entered politics. Now, Carney said, this is a quote, the latest tariffs on steel and aluminum are unjustified, they're illegal, they're bad for American workers, bad for American industry, and of course, for Canadian industry as well. Well, they would actually be beneficial to American industry. The whole idea is that if other nations in the world are going to charge tariffs to the United States is going to try and reciprocate, which means equalize. And also, at the same time, bring capital into the United States to build factories and to create jobs for the American worker. Ending the trade deficits means putting more money into American pockets. Trade deficits mean, for the United States, that more money is leaving the country than is entering. Trump has decided he wants to reverse that trend. Now, this is... Carney went on to note that Canada currently has counter tariffs on more than $90 billion of U.S. imports before remission, saying the government has acted strong by putting those in place. Again, I got to remind you, tariffs charged by Canada to the United States make things more expensive for Canadians. So the victory lap here is costing you money. The American tariffs are not costing the Canadian consumer any money. It's the Canadian tariff response that is costing you money. Global news doesn't bother to tell you that. I like this one too. Down here a little further, the Prime Minister went on to tell reporters that the government would take some time, and take some time is in quotes, but then they put, but not much, to determine the next steps, as the two governments are in intensive discussions right now on a trading relationship. This article doesn't mention the fact that it was released a couple days within the last few days that they're very close to inking a new trade deal. So it's like they're doing the elbows up thing at the exact same time as it looks like elbows down is a thing, and we're begging the Americans to shield us under the golden dome that Trump is trying to build. And then we're getting offended that we might actually have to pay some money for that defense. It's probably not surprising that in a country so addicted to welfare, like Canada is, we have a culture of welfare, we would expect the same treatment from the world. We want the world to just underwrite our national spending, including this golden dome. But I do find it very telling that this article takes some time, but not much. What does that mean? How can this qualify as news? How can this qualify as informative? Sucking and blowing at the exact same time. Welcome to the Mark Carney Prime Ministership. And oh, by the way, it's Wednesday. We're halfway through the week. We are halfway through the parliamentary session. In about 10 days, they all go home for 3 months. That's the level of crisis that we're living under right now. Parliament is going to go on vacation until the fall. Isn't it grand? Speaking of immigration, everybody by now has read this article or some version of this article. I may have even talked about it in a previous video. Canada took in 817,000 new immigrants in the first 4 months of 2025. It's a terrible headline. It's just not true. I don't know why we got to exaggerate, because the real situation in Canada is bad enough without having to hyperinflate numbers by pretending that this is accurate. We have a temporary foreign worker program. The renewals of those who are already approved for the TFW program, whether you agree with it or not, I certainly don't. In the towns near me, in small town Saskatchewan, there's no vacancies at the hotels because they're packed full of TFWs. And the kids around here can't get jobs because TFWs have got them all. But that's a whole separate issue. Those renewals are included in this number. But I want to talk about Germany. Germany sets record for naturalizations in 2024 with Syrians and Turks topping the charts. And how many people did they naturalize? Did they give German citizenship to? 249,000. Canada brings in at a minimum 500,000 people who get citizenship every single year. Germany has a population somewhere around 84 million. Canada has a population somewhere around 41 million. We have the highest immigration rate in the Western world, or at least one of the highest. And that's not including TFWs or people who come in on student visas who are granted pathways to citizenship. That's just the permanent residents who become citizens. Why are we doing this? And where, as if we look at this German situation, they're dealing with Syrians and Turks. Very different cultures, very different ethnicities, very different story arcs and national identities, ethnic identities, cultural, religious identities from that of the German people. Canada's doing it from India, China, Nigeria, not from Europe, not from people with a common cultural ancestry, but from societies that are often completely incompatible with our supposed moral structure. Our charter rights, which aren't really rights, but setting that aside, our norms, our customs, the progress that we made on avoiding child marriage and child labor. I've gone over in my videos how the prevalence of child marriage in different countries and the prevalence of in-family marital relations, as I struggle here to try to avoid keywords that might get me censored by the algorithm or at least get my reach reduced, which, since there's no way to understand what words are actually being keyworded, it's a guessing game. But these are all factors that we should be thinking about when we bring people in. Compatibility, common language, whether or not people are going to leave the ethnic and cultural and religious disputes of their former home behind in their former home and just come here to be Canadian. A peaceful society, to do hard work, not spend all their time on the streets waving Palestinian flags and destroying property, ruining. I saw a video clip. It was Castle Loma. It's a castle in Ontario that people go and tour. And because it's a highly trafficked public place, these Palestinian activists had to show up there and ruin everything for people just trying to look at a castle. What has it got to do with Canada? And we got Elizabeth May and politicians in Parliament celebrating this nonsense. It's a conflict overseas. It's just like the Khalistanis versus the Hindus. What are we doing? We're either a nation or we're not a nation. We can't be both at the same time, though our government seems committed to being that way. The high level of immigration here in Canada, and by the way, the Germans also have a temporary foreign worker program. It's not called a TFW program. Just set that aside for a minute. It focuses on skilled workers, so tradespeople. And they can only come in for a year to fill gaps in the economy. They have a little bit more room, mobility under the German system. So they're not tied to a specific employer like they are here. In Canada, we don't bring in skilled workers. We bring in unskilled workers to work the fast food joints. I personally cannot support fast food companies anymore. I'm not making a big difference because every time I go into town, there's lineups out the wazoo to get coffee at Tim Hortons. It's disgusting to me because we are bringing in essentially indentured serfs. They live in poor conditions. They work really hard. They barely speak English. They displace Canadian-born peoples of all ethnic backgrounds, race, colors, and creeds who can't get work. They're subsidized, and it only benefits the corporate owners. It's disgusting. Tim Hortons is owned by Brazilians. Tim Hortons is not a Canadian company. Tim Hortons hires TFWs by the thousands and tens of thousands. They displace Canadians. Yet their advertising is wrapped and draped in the Canadian flag. It's fake. It's disgusting. And we can compare and contrast how European nations and Canada, their different immigration systems, we all have the same problem, which is mass scale, largely unvetted immigration causing huge cultural, ethnic, and national cohesion problems, and also creating a massive welfare burden. 1.6 million immigrants in Canada. By the way, 1 in 4 people in Canada now is a new Canadian, quote unquote. And 1.6 million of them, so we're talking like 8 to 10 million people are new Canadians. 16% of them, depending on how you score it, 16 to 20% of them are disabled and will qualify for benefits as disabled people. They're dependents either on the state or on the people that they're tied with who have to work to pay for them. Why are we doing that? We can't save the whole world. We can't take care of all the world's dispossessed. We're broke. Tax burdens are so high, and the quality of social services is in such perennial decline. How can people not see? We can't even save ourselves, let alone the entire planet's poor and dispossessed. At the same time, we oppose the development of these poor nations in the name of climate change. If we really cared about the world's poor, we would let them develop. We would let them industrialize. We would let them lift themselves up. But we're claiming in the name of fighting carbon dioxide that we cannot. In fact, we have to keep them down in spite of the fact that in terms of carbon dioxide, in terms of net negative impact on the world, fossil fuels are much better for the planet than old-style farming methods like horse-drawn plows, ox-drawn plows. These things are detrimental. Fossil fuels are actually an improvement, not just on productivity for the person, but in terms of net overall pollution. Now, I was an organic farmer. I did all the old methods. I didn't have livestock, but I farmed largely by hand. I used to brag about the tonnage of food that I produced while burning very little in the way of fossil fuels, like less than 100 liters of fossil fuel in a given season, and I could produce tonnages of food with just my own labor. I've had to adjust my thinking somewhat because the world can't keep doing it that way. If you actually care about poverty, if you actually care about the environment, I mean, some of the statistics, the world is greening. Deforestation is actually slowing, not increasing, but you would never know that to read the environmental news. That's a whole other rabbit hole that I want to go down soon because I'm actually reading a book and I'm probably going to do a book review on it. But if we actually, we're at such crossroads. We can't allow them to develop. We can't allow them to lift themselves up out of poverty. And at the same time, our politicians are insisting that we deindustrialize and that we get our carbon footprint down to the level of Chad and the Congo. And there's only one real way to do that, and that is for everybody to sacrifice their prosperity. At the same time as they're wagging their fingers at us about our carbon footprint, we're bringing in hundreds of thousands of immigrants every single year, and every one of them is net carbon positive. What are we doing here? Anyway, migrants in the UK are receiving $1 billion per month in welfare benefits. I don't know if you know this, but the UK is broke, can't afford it. Dutch Parliament says niet to NATO defense spending plan amid chaos of Geert Wilders' pullout. So the Dutch government's in collapse. The largest parties pulled out of a coalition because they're not taking action on the problems associated with immigration. All across Europe, Geert is just one leader of the largest party in the Netherlands. But all across Europe, this sentiment is rising because it's the correct sentiment. And instead of embracing the correct sentiment, instead of acknowledging the reality of it, the European Union is doing everything in its power to oppose the rise of politicians that are actually talking about common sense. So you have Le Pen being targeted in France. You have the recent Romanian debacle, which we've covered in other videos. You have the AfD, which is, I believe, the second largest party in Germany now, but according to polling, they're now the largest party in Germany, largely due to the immigration problem. And instead of actually dealing with the problem, they just want to outlaw these parties. They just want to outlaw these voices and keep flooding Europe with more of it. And as I wrap this up and try to keep it under a half hour, I just want to talk about the fires that are raging in Saskatchewan and Manitoba. They are absolutely massive in scale, and I want to remind you once again, as everybody seeks to politicize this and blame it on the government, whether they're blaming it on Scott Moe, nobody's blaming it on Wab Kinew. Two different premiers, completely different treatment, just based on their perceived political alignment. And even though they can't do much about this, this situation is dire all the same. This is L'Orange. It's the one place that you can find on any map when it comes to Saskatchewan in the north, which is nothing but bush, folks. There's no infrastructure. These yellow roads are glorified mud paths. There just isn't much up here. There's not much infrastructure. So these fires, when they rage through a 50, 60, 70-year-old forest, they're going to burn. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to basically and essentially clear the forest floor. You have to clear the debris. Or you have to burn it off. And we don't do these things in the name of environmentalism, which leads to a buildup of the fuel because the forest is always trying to burn, and this gets lost in the conversation. Nobody's telling you the fact that the forest wants to burn. But that's not to take away from the seriousness of it. L'Orange is in a bad way. And anybody that's up there working and fighting this fire is in increasing danger as they're surrounded. Whether they can hold the town or not remains to be seen, but it's not good. And then when we have a look at Flin Flon, so one side of the border is Flin Flon, and on the other side of the border it's Creighton, just two different names for the same town, completely surrounded by fire. And the wind is still blowing today, and there's no rain in sight. In spite of everything I've said about the politics and everything else, this is a very serious situation for all of those involved, and these fires are absolutely massive, and we should keep all of these people in our thoughts and in our prayers and hope, because I was talking to a local the other day, and they said that they recalled fires many years ago where the season started out dry like this, and there were extensive forest fires, and then the weather pattern changed, the supercells came, and then it was tornadoes for the rest of summer. Will we see a repeat of that? I don't know. That's what life in the bush is like. Talking to all the old-timers in their 60s, their 70s, and their 80s, they shrug this stuff off. I remember when I was driving around up north, I was actually driving around this fire right here, and I parked. I'll show you exactly where I parked. We parked right here, and trucks and cars were coming and going all day. People pulling into the field, and it was like a little party in the field as the fires burned, because there's nothing else you can do. You might think it's morbid, but there's nothing else you can do. These fires are generational. Like, they happen once every couple generations, fires on this scale. So, I mean, it's all you can do is watch. There's nothing else you can do. The kind of manpower it would take to suppress this doesn't exist. And even if it did, suppressing it would mean delaying it. That's all you can really do. But as these people were coming and going, I'm talking to the old timers, and they're talking about their memories of the last time this happened. And fire season is just part of the equation. Now, as we're sitting there watching these fires, in this field down here, a guy was seeding. And in this field over here, another guy was seeding. Life goes on, folks. Fire season's just part of it. Fires have always raged in the forest. The natives, before Europeans got here, had burning practices to maintain both the forest but also to ease hunting. Fire's part of it. We've lost perspective. It's an irony to me that in an age of information where we have all the information at our fingertips, where there's virtually no excuse for not understanding how things work, people have become so disassociated from nature itself. People who have an enormous amount of concern and stress, who signal virtue when it comes to climate change in nature, yet have no understanding of how things actually work and how normal forest fires actually are. And that if you want to prevent forest fires, you have to intervene before they happen by getting rid of the fuel before it burns. You either have to burn it or you have to manually remove it. Otherwise, it will burn. That's it. I'm Frank Vaughn. I'll see you in the next one. Did you know that I have a website, frankvaughn.ca, the ultimate repository for all of my work, and a backup location just in case the censors come for me again? And if you like the content, please consider using the donate link in one of the options available. There are no paywalls, there is no advertising, and there is no Patreon, and I intend to keep it that way. Thank you for your time and your consideration.